Hi everyone, good morning. I'm going to do my John Maxwell now, and I decided to sit here because it's easier than standing. So I'm going to start in a moment. So I'm starting a new chapter today on this John Maxwell, and I've covered quite a bit. I'm still looking at 21 qualities of leaders in the Bible. And for this week, I'm going to be looking at teachability. To keep learning, we keep leading. Once we know how to learn, we know how to lead. So for the important things to remember as I go through the case studies, it's leaders who are comfortable with the status quo lose influence and effectiveness over time. Because this idea comes in like, why should I learn? Why reinvent it? If it's working, don't fix it. There's nothing left to learn. And if we have that attitude, we don't grow. We don't learn anything new. And in our world, we will get left behind if we don't. That's why you'll find I'm always taking courses. I'm always trying to learn the new things that are coming out in Canada, and I'm sharing them with others, because we always have to be able to learn, unlearn, and relearn what we're doing. We never arrive at the finish line. We grow and we learn, and we remain teachable whenever we take on new things, even if it's cooking a new meal or learning to bake something new. We're learning to do something that we haven't done before, and we're growing. And by doing that, we're growing our leadership skills, and we're preparing for the future. And if we're not prepared to learn, then we're not prepared to win, because we only learn by losing. Every time we lose, we learn. And every time we make a mistake, we learn, because then we know how not to do it the next time. We have to accept the comfort of dislearning and unlearning. We have to accept the discomfort of learning something new. It's the same thing if you look at sports. When I used to play tennis as a little girl, we had big wooden rackets. The rackets were so heavy, you couldn't even hit the ball. They were heavy rackets because they were made out of wood, and you had to keep them in a press. Once you finish playing, you had to keep your racket in a tennis press, because otherwise the wood would warp. And you had to make sure there was a bottle of water in your cupboard so that the wood would stay moist. Today you don't have that. Most of the rackets are either plastic or metal. They have different strings that you can use, which makes it easier to play. So there's a lot of things that have come about because of change that have made it easier, but getting to that point is difficult. So the case study for today was on King Nebuchadnezzar and how he had to learn, what he had to learn in his leadership. And King Nebuchadnezzar is the one in the Bible who they say gave food for life. So he fed all the people, all the birds of the air used to come to him. Like he had an abundant kingdom, if you look at that analogy. And the Catholic TV actually have a program called Food for Life. So it's taken from this scripture. And if you want to make a note of the readings, you can read Daniel 4, verses 4 to 37. So it's very long, but you can go through it on your own. The first question, because King Nebuchadnezzar didn't heed the advice that was given to him, so you find that he went through a period of being turned away from the kingdom. He went through a period of hardship, and then he had to come back to God. So it's again this theme of Lent, of going, looking at how are we turning away from God or towards God. And the first question is, what do you believe would have happened if Nebuchadnezzar had been teachable, heeded Daniel's advice, and repented instead of ignoring it for 12 months? So he could have been in a better position. He could have avoided being driven out from his people, forced to live like the animals and eat grass, and that's in verse 33. The second question is, how would you describe Nebuchadnezzar's attitude and personality before the prophecy was fulfilled? How would you say he thought of himself? So Nebuchadnezzar was proud of what he had accomplished. He was proud of what he had done, his power and his glory before the prophecy was fulfilled, and everything that he had achieved. The third question is, how would you describe him after he was restored? So he praised God, he honored him, and he glorified him, and he returned back to God. And that's important to remember, because we see that in our own communities. We see that when the laws of the land do not support what is life-giving, what is for God, what is helping people, then people look for a different leader, because at the end of the day, the community starts to crumble and the society starts to crumble. Or that leader is removed from that position somehow by God. And then the fourth question is, what would you say is the lesson the king learned? So after he obeyed God, he was restored, people sought him out, and he became greater than he was before, compared to when he didn't obey God. And that's important for us to remember as well, because right now we have a situation in our world where Christians are being hurt, we're being persecuted, we're being put into poverty. And you see this, they're saying it's about perspective, but actually it's not about perspective, because things start out slowly, and when people like me speak up and tell them this is not going to end well, they don't want to listen. And then we have now what we have in Canada, because it wasn't only me speaking up for what was happening with MAID, with the policies being put in place with the drugs. And it's okay for other people from other countries to say that the drug policies worked in their countries. That's fine if it worked in their countries, but they are not living here. They are not Canadians. They don't know how the community operates here, what we accept in Canada. So because Europe had adopted policies on legalizing hard drugs, decriminalizing them, and it worked there, other people were saying, oh, well, it worked there, so it should work in Canada. But it didn't work in Canada, and we have a huge problem now. So we have to look at our own systems, and we have to look at what we are doing. And really and truly, is it good to promote drugs, to promote drug usage, to have demonstrations outside of schools, to promote the Intifada? Is it really and truly good at the end of the day for all of Canada? And those are the things we have to ask ourselves when we're going back to God's law and God's principles. Even this LOL culture that they have in the banks, is it really and truly benefiting Canada and Canadians? Because now, and that's why I had put a message on John Maxwell's page that the team should try to come to Canada, because Canadians are being turned away at the border. For the US, we're being asked to register if we're staying for more than a month. We're being treated like we're an enemy to the United States, not a friend. So it's scary for us. A lot of people who supported Trump, who voted for Trump and wanted him to come in, didn't think that this is the way that Canadians would be treated. Because at the end of the day, we're not Americans, we're Canadians. So it's important for us to remember that, and to remember we're also a God-fearing people. We're also people whose land was built on Christian principles, and sometimes that gets used to support discrimination, just like it was in Zimbabwe and South Africa. Like with me, when I was harassed, I was told by the Liberals, oh, you need to go to the police and the banks. And then when I went to the police and the banks, they refused to confirm that I was saying no to their VPs and being friends with people in the workplace. Because at the end of the day, that held me back in my career because a bad impression was created of me. But I did everything right. I did everything good. I kept my faith, and yet I was punished for it. So it's important to remember what we're dealing with, who we're dealing with. The banks don't care about religion. If they did, I would have been supported in getting my credentials as a spiritual director. I would have been supported in getting my credentials for HR, going to Rotman. I didn't get a penny from anyone. I invested in it in myself. And I did it to help myself, and I used it to build up the community. But my own life is not getting better financially because I'm putting out the money. My family is helping me, hoping that I'll get a break, and yet that's not happening. Why? Because people in this community and this culture are not God-fearing people. They're not going to promote somebody who wants to go to church, who wants time off to be with family, who wants to keep holy days of obligation. That's not what they're looking for. They just want you to meet the results, and if you're only interested in meeting the results, eventually your companies are going to fail, because that's what's happened at TD. That's what's happened at other places where even Teleperformance, they took the jobs to South Africa. Because when employees speak up, we get silenced. We get told, just do your job. That doesn't happen in South Africa. If employees speak up, they listen to them and they listen to what they're saying and they take it seriously. And even if you go on LinkedIn and you look at the celebrations and all that Teleperformance has in South Africa compared to here or compared to other countries, you can see the difference in how the employees get treated. They get treated much, much better in the other countries. So that's important. If your employees don't feel valued, if they don't feel like they've got a career, they've got a future, then they're just going to do what you tell them to do, because that's what you're telling them you want in Canada. You just want them to do what you are telling them to do, and that's it. And you're not going to give them any special treatment. You're not going to give them days off for religion. You're not going to accommodate their health. If the client doesn't want it, you're just going to focus on getting the next lot in and treating us like cattle. That's what's happening in Canada. And that's what John Maxwell is saying, that that's not the way to treat people. It's not the right way, and it's not a good way of being in society, whether it's in our companies or our communities or in organizations. You have to be able to look at the individual and then look at the learning process, and then only things will change. So all the fines and everything that they had at TD, do you think it changed their culture? It didn't. They're still protecting the executive. They're still not doing what's right by the community, by the community faith groups. They're not doing what's good. And when you have that kind of a thing happen, then you have the MPs eventually revolting like they did against Justin Trudeau. Because when I wrote to the Liberals to tell them that myself and our communities, the churches, are not supporting MAID, I got a reply saying that we believe this is the right way. So they're just going to keep forcing people to accept the laws they're bringing in, even when those laws are hurting people. and they're hurting people who with a little bit of support can hold jobs, can earn good incomes, and can thrive. Because it's unrealistic to expect somebody to continue to work overnight for many years when the science proves you'll end up having health problems. But that's what they say. If you don't want the job, then you just have to go, and there's no severance pay. We're just not going to do it. That's the attitude of the companies in Canada, including Teleperformance. So it's sad, because the people at the top are just saying, oh, well, I worked to get to where I am and no one helped me. So because no one helped you, you're not going to help anybody else. It's a horrible way to live. And it's a horrible society to create. Because when I came into Canada, I didn't even want to come here. I wanted to stay in England because I liked England so much. I didn't want to come here. And then when I came, it turned out to be worse than I thought it would be. I came with my skills, I came with my faith, I came with my talent, I came with a positive attitude, and they wouldn't even give me a job packing boxes. They're like, oh, you don't have Canadian experience. I'm like, come on, to pack a box, you mean to tell me there's nobody that can show me how to pack that box the Canadian way? It's discrimination. Then the same thing happened in the banks. The same thing happens in all the companies here. And those of us who come here from other places can't believe it. It's become so bad. So we have to be the change makers in our society. And because of people like me, others are having it easier, the people who are coming in now, because there are systems in place to help them get their credentials, to get support from the government for retraining, for second career programs. And they're also taking away the right of people to use drugs outside schools, in main areas. That's what we need. We don't need to have, if I'm walking down the street, I don't want to feel unsafe because there's somebody high on marijuana coming up to me and accosting me, stopping me in front of the church. That's what's happening today. So I'll leave you with that. And you can read the scripture and reflect on your own life and your own communities where you are. And the things that work in Europe don't work here. I can tell you now, because Canada is nowhere near where Europe is in terms of our transit, in terms of the social support, in terms of anything. We're very, very far behind Europe. And so is America. America is not as advanced as Europe. The only thing they care about is money in this society. When you have money, everybody treats you well. And when you don't have money, everybody treats you badly. And that's the reality. But at the end of the day, the society will crumble, just like how Canada's crumbling, because they don't put God first. And those of us who are suffering because of it didn't have to suffer, because we told them the right way and they didn't want to listen. And there's a lot of unpaid work here. If you go and look at my LinkedIn, look at all the volunteering I've done, add it up, count all the years, and put it at $35 an hour, see what you come up with.